Morning, everyone. I now call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 12 of the House Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee is studying the subject matter of Supplementary Estimate C 2021-22, votes 1C, 5C and 10C under the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. The committee will also resume its study of traceability of fish and seafood products in the second panel today. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to Standing Order of November 25, 2021. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. Please inform me immediately if interpretation is lost, and we'll ensure it is restored before resuming. The raise hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking, and speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your mic should be on mute. All comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. A reminder to all participants that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. And of course, our guests for the first hour.
Mr. Chair.
Of course, the Honourable Joyce Murray.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chair.
I'm not going to introduce all her officials. We can see their names, and if anybody has questions, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't hearing the interpretation, but I am familiar with your opening statement, but I just wanted to say that I wasn't hearing the interpretation.
Okay, it is it corrected now on the interpretation? So, you're still not, Madame Debienne, are you still not hearing me in French?
Non, je vous entends.
No, I don't hear you in French, but I have selected interpretation, French. I don't understand what's happening, unfortunately.
So it's not it's translating to French, but not translating the English to French. Can we ask our interpreters to check on that before we start the actual committee? Someone got their hands up down in the backs.
My assistant can't hear the interpretation either, so two of us have a problem.
Okay, but if I say something now in English, as I'm doing, is it being translated in French? It's working here in the room. The translation is taking place to members in the room. So, Madame Debienne, are you hearing it on your end? No?
Moi non plus, monsieur.
Me neither, Mr. Chair.
Moi aussi.
Same for me.
Okay, we'll get that checked on. So we'll just pause for a moment, see what's going on. Just to let everyone know, the technicians are working to get this resolved, and we'll resume as soon as we get the go-ahead from them.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you very much. Super.
So by that super comment, I take that as you are getting the proper translation. Yeah, I see a thumbs up. Okay, so we got that resolved. We're back. One thing I want to bring up is, before we get into the actual presentation today, is we did have a liaison committee meeting yesterday, and I want to remind everyone, we had a presentation from Interpretation Services. They're having a lot of problems doing their job, and the effect on them is very impressive, or not impressive, it shouldn't be happening, is people not wearing the proper equipment, whether when they're on Zoom or not. It is recommended that you wear the House-issued headphones. If that is not the case, going forward, you will not be able to take part in the meeting. You'll be able to listen, but you will not be able to speak whatsoever, because we have to enforce that for the health and safety of the interpretation and the people providing that service. So we'll continue on now with today's meeting. Of course, as we all know, we have Minister Joyce Murray and our staff here this morning, and the floor is yours, Minister, for your opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Chair. Happy to be here again. And bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. It is a pleasure to be joining you today here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples, alongside senior officials from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the Canadian Coast Guard.
Tim Sargent, Commissioner, Coast Guard Commissioner Mario Pelletier, and their senior teams. I'll start by providing a brief overview of my department's 21-22 Supplementary Estimate C before speaking about some of the high-level items in more detail. And following my remarks, I'll be happy to answer any questions, of course, that you have about these proposed expenditures. Through the supplementary estimates exercise, this sub-C, I'm seeking $243.2 million. And these funds will be used for three key initiatives. Firstly, $148.4 million for the Small Craft Harbors program. Secondly, $36.8 million for the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative. And thirdly, $31.3 million to offset costs associated with the Bly Island marine pollution incident. Mr. Chair, last week I attended the Seafood Expo North America, what may be referred to as the Boston Seafood Show. I met stakeholders, discussed our growing blue economy, and promoted Canada's world-class fish and seafood sectors. The fish and seafood sector is critical to our country's economy, and by and large in excellent shape thanks to the stewardship of harvesters and industry. In 2021, Canada exported $8.7 billion worth of fish and seafood to 119 countries. And in 2020, the commercial fishing, aquaculture, and processing sectors employed over 68,000 people. That's very significant. Harvesters depend on small craft harbors. 90% of Canada's fish and seafood moves through DFO's national network of small craft harbors, in fact. Le maintien de près de
Keeping almost 1,000 commercial harbors safe, accessible, and in good repair requires considerable time, effort, and money. The funding I'm requesting today will speed up repair and maintenance of DFO's core small craft harbors in communities across the country. It will also be used to divest non-core harbors and close inactive harbors that are unsafe but can't be divested.
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned during my last appearance, our government is making a generational investment to stabilize and restore Pacific salmon and salmon habitat for the communities, the people, and the ecosystems that depend on their sustainability. The funding that I'm requesting today will go towards the Pacific Salmon Strategy Initiative, which uses a collaborative approach to address Pacific salmon declines and to ensure federal investments are focused on the areas of the greatest importance. Some of the areas we're targeting are the implementation of key activities across all 4 of the PSSI pillars, activities such as creating a habitat restoration center of expertise, climate science, and ecosystem planning. Secondly, an enhanced fisheries monitoring process, and also a commercial license retirement support program for harvesters, as well as the allocation of capital funding to build and retrofit both DFO and community hatcheries. The Department's continuing work will ensure new and ongoing investments in Pacific salmon are appropriately aligned in response to these unfortunate and historic declines, as well as the development of a conservation approach and plans to support the recovery of prioritized salmon populations. With this funding, we will provide sustainable harvest opportunities for the Indigenous, commercial, and recreational sectors through effective stewardship and integrated ecosystem planning. Mr. Chair, between December 2020 and July 2021, the Canadian Coast Guard led a unified response to a petroleum leak stemming from a historic shipwreck near Bligh Island in British Columbia. By the time this environmental response concluded, 60 tons of pollutants were removed from the ship and surrounding waters at a cost of $31.3 million. Our government funded this environmental response operation given the urgency of the situation and because the shipwreck occurred in 1968, and that exceeds the time limitation to claim response expenses against the vessel owner under Canada's Marine Liability Act. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, my department is well positioned to deliver on our government's priorities. The funding I'm seeking today will allow Fisheries and Oceans Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard to continue carrying out its important work on behalf of the people we serve. I'm happy to answer any questions related to this work with the assistance of officials. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Minister. I don't know if either one of the staff had an opening statement. I didn't ask that at the beginning. I apologise if they do. Okay, we'll go right to rounds of questioning. To start off, of course, for the questioning, we'll go to Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Minister, for coming and for your appearance. I'd like to follow up on my question to you in the House yesterday about the expropriation of the crab and elver quota that you recently announced. It's important, obviously. I appreciate that reconciliation occur and that fishery plays an important part of it. You mentioned that you were working, or the department was working with industry to find solutions. The industry, those two industries have told me that actually the DFO approach has been to tell them what was going to happen, not actually consult. And on January 5th, you wrote to me regarding entrance in the elver fishery. And I quote from that letter, it said, access to the elver fishery can currently be obtained through a private arrangement. You rejected the idea of opening up new licenses for the elver fishery. And then again on February 24th, in response to another letter to me with regard to elvers, you wrote, this was dealing with the elver reallocation of the 14% or more a shift of the quota, that this reallocation would occur without any financial assistance to license holders. Expropriation of quota now has all fishers and all species worried, and their investors worried, that you are going to continue to take this arbitrary approach to reallocating quota. Hundreds of millions of dollars of debt and businesses are at stake. So I'd like to know, why have you as minister abandoned the long-held policy, which your letters confirm to me, that as established under the Marshall Response as well, that the approach of the department is that Indigenous acquisition of quota and effort will be done through a willing buyer, willing seller process only? And why have you abandoned that?
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Perkins, because it gives me a chance to confirm that no decisions have been made and implemented on either the Area E crab fishery nor the Elver fishery at this point, and we are in discussion with both the Indigenous communities and the fish harvester communities on these matters. The reality is that First Nations have a treaty-affirmed right to fish for a moderate livelihood on the East Coast, and DFO is working on a nation-to-nation basis to further implement that right. And in Area E, a court ruling granted the Nuu-chah-nulth communities additional rights over the crab fishery, and we are working to implement that as well.
I appreciate that, but the court didn't say remove 50% of the existing quota and transfer it to other fishers. That was your decision, and you have communicated that directly, both in letter and in meeting to those fishers. But I'm going to ask you a question on another issue. We have an obligation to pay our dues to the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. That money pays to help control invasive species, as you know. And through 5 ministers of fisheries under this government in 6 years, not one minister has paid our full dues to that commission. This year, the Americans expect us to be putting in $19.4 million in funding, but we have only allocated, in your estimates, $10.6 million. That's an $8.8 million shortfall. The U.S. expressed their desire for us, obviously, to pay our full resources to protect invasive species, but they are now talking about not continuing to pay our share of those. So will you commit that you will return the government to paying its full obligations?
Well, thanks for the question on the Great Lake Fisheries Commission, and I want to just I just want to acknowledge the great work that they do, and that the effectiveness that they've had with the sea lamprey control activities that they've been leading, and with backed by science over all of these years. And I know that the Commission is advocating for a governance change. We are working closely with interested parties to make sure that we make the best decision for Canadians. And
well, the best decision
I'm going to make
is
sure that the
to pay
good
the
work
bills.
they're doing is not adversely affected during this period.
The best decision is to pay the bills and to not allow that invasive species to overtake the Great Lakes and to live up to our obligation.
Yeah.
The Avon River, summer dust storms have been wreaking havoc in the town of Windsor. When you sign the order every 2 weeks to allow that river to stay dry, once spring is over, the riverbed dries up and it's sand. And we have these terrible, terrible sandstorms in the town of Windsor. The Liberal Member of Parliament for Kings Hants has written to you many times, has been very public, asking for you to alter that order. Personally, I'd like you to alter the order to return the pond, but to alter that order so that at least in the summer, some water is kept in the pond so that we don't get these environmentally hazardous and health hazard windstorms in the town, sandstorms in the town of Windsor. Will you commit to look at altering that order when the time comes?
Well, what I will commit is what we're doing, which is working with the town, working with the province, who is responsible for the highway that is part of this challenge, and local community members that have been using the recreational facilities in the past in that area, and finding with them a way forward that also respects and protects the habitat that is important in that area for our fisheries. So we're very constructively engaged with all the partners on this, and I'm confident that we'll find a way forward that's mutually acceptable to all.
So the dust storms will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Gone a little bit over time. We'll now go to Mr. Morrissey, who I understand may be sharing his time, and I'll leave it up to him to decide when that is. I will remind committee members to direct your comments through the chair. When somebody says you, that would be me, and I have no intent of responding. So, I hear the Speaker in the House say that many times. I was waiting a long while to say it. So, and to you, Mr. Morrissey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, I'm sharing my time with Mr. Cormier. Welcome, Minister. And Minister, I have to pass on a compliment that was made to you in an earlier committee meeting when we were studying issues on the West Coast. One of the witnesses said, "You are the lone voice defending salmon." Madam Minister, so I wanted to pass that on. My question is on small craft harbors. So you identified in the supplementary to additional money. My question to you is, our government has committed significant additional dollars in the capital budgets for small craft harbors, which are so important, as you identified, to our coastal rural communities. My question is, could you give us some information on how fast your department is able to transfer it from a budget decision to actual piles being driven at these harbors across Atlantic Canada or any place else? Could you just give us a brief overview on the timeline it takes to get it from budget to actual projects, and then that work actually happening for the benefit of fishers?
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Chair, this is earpiece is cutting in and out. I don't know if the technical staff can do anything about that, but just in terms of amplification, so it's not working very well. So yes, I can talk about that, and then I will turn it over to the deputy for more precise timing. But I think for those that are interested in small craft harbors, which is many people across Canada, this is almost 1,000 small craft harbors. There was a lack of funding for 10 years into this program, and so there was a lot of backed up maintenance needed when we were elected. And since 2016, we've announced $784 million to invest in the Small Craft Harbors program. And in this budget 2021, recent budget, $300 million. And as I mentioned, there is significant amount in the supplementary estimates. So what does it take to get from a budget to actually getting shovels in the ground is a set of steps, because we want to do this on a needs basis. And there's almost 1,000 of them. So first step is that staff in the regional offices collect information to evaluate the variety of proposed projects to do upgrades or replacements, and they have a uniform set of criteria across all the regions. 2, they make their evaluations on the safety and security, as well as level of activity and value of catch, and they feed that information in. Then the department conducts a national peer review of all of the proposals across the country to determine which ones should be prioritized in a master 5-year plan. So unfortunately, this is not, so it does not mean that there's going to be weeks between the funding and the action, and I know people are very keen to get the job done. Lastly, the department works with Indigenous groups and community leaders in the planning and design of this specific project, and at that point the dollars can flow. So perhaps the deputy
actually,
can give
Minister,
a bit more.
yeah, that's fine. If your official could provide the details and the rest,
we can do that in
because
writing.
I want to turn my time to my colleague, Mr. Cormier. So if we could get the details submitted to the committee, that would be great. Thank you, Minister.
Merci à mon collègue.
Thank you to my colleague, Mr. Morrissey. Minister, I don't have much time left, but I'd like to thank you for coming to my writing last week. We had the opportunity to make a great announcement at a factory with Jake Augustine. We met with 2 associations, the Regional Federation of Professional Acadian Fishers, crab and lobster and shrimp are important industries in my riding. Over the last 5 years, we've had We've had whales in the St. Lawrence Gulf and in my riding, which has been affecting fisheries. We've put all resources in place in recent years so that the season can begin as early as possible with de-icing operations. So I'd like for you to share with us what you're doing this year so that we can start the season as early as possible so we can have the least amount of interaction with whales so we can have a good season for the whole industry. Thank you, Minister.
Merci de sa question.
Thank you for the question.
Et,
Thank you, Mr. Cormier, and thank you for the opportunity to visit and see the people and the fisheries on the Acadian Peninsula last week.
As you mentioned, conversations with fish harvesters, the Association of Crabbers, Acadiens, and I just saw how important the crab fishery is to your community and the critical role DFO plays by getting access to the fishery as early as possible in the season. Thank you for showing me those maps of the ice and how it slowly melts, and there are choke points, and so that's the essence of what we're working on. We know that crabbers have to get out into the water as early as possible. And so there are some areas in the inner harbor. We have small icebreakers heading up to your area, the Coast Guard icebreakers, as we speak. The amphibious machines that need to go into those tighter channels to move that ice, that contract is those contracts are being signed, and those will be there soon. Then there will be heavier icebreakers and Canadian Coast Guard hovercraft. So we're putting all of our equipment and our forces to help your constituents and fishers get out on the water as soon as possible.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks again for your visit last week.
Thank you, Mr. Cormier. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to thank the Minister for joining us. It's always appreciated. The Minister is very generous with her time, and we really appreciate it. Minister, Mr. Chair, there are $148 million in this new batch of millions, and we're a bit concerned in Quebec about our small craft harbors that aren't necessarily for commercial use, but rather for recreation, for access to activities on the water. There's Verchères, that's celebrating its 350th anniversary this year. It has a port, a harbor that belongs to the federal government, and there are fences up because it's inaccessible. It's the 350th anniversary. That's older than Canada. So there's concern there. For the festivities, there will be a beautiful setup, and then there will be a dock that's out of use. So my question would be, of that $148 million, how much will go to small harbors like that one that really need to be repaired and that the municipality is ready to take on once it's repaired? We have a few in the Magdalen Islands, Orleans Island, and a number of different places. I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Thank you for that question. And as I mentioned, the process of making a decision amongst 1,000 harbors, especially when there was a big backlog of work facing us in 2016, is a careful one. It's not as fast as people would like, but we are absolutely committed to repairing and transitioning some of these harbors. So where there is not a core commercial purpose, and that commercial purpose can be things other than fisheries, it can be tourism and so on, but where there is not a core purpose and there is a community interested, we divest the docks, the wharfs to the community. And that is a very positive program because I have visited small harbors where the community, the harbor management group has a whole set of community members that are involved with the work that they're doing, and it is really a strong community building process, and it sounds like a natural for your situation, but I'll turn it over to the deputy if there are any specifics we can share.
Oui, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. In fact, the dock in Verchères is a priority for us. We're very aware of the issue you mentioned. Yes, it's a real priority.
Bon, je suis contente d'entendre.
Good, I'm glad to hear that. It gives us some hope. The people of Verchères will be pleased as well, and my colleague Xavier Barsalou Duval as well. In another vein, the Coast Guard in Quebec, I've been told that there are some emergency services that aren't always available in French. There were some facts brought up, and in terms of budgets and equipment, they're not accidents like we've seen on the Pacific coast, but there are people who've lost their lives because the Coast Guard wasn't equipped to go save them in Baie des Rochers, people who were paddleboarding. So is there a budget for equipment for the St. Lawrence, for the Coast Guard?
Well, thank you for that question. And firstly, je voudrais dire que
I'd like to say that we commit to offering services in both official languages throughout the country as best as possible. For this specific question, for equipment, I will ask the Commissioner to answer. Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, there's a budget to ensure that equipment is the best available. And we have an equipment review program in place, and we ensure that all search and rescue teams have the same type of equipment from one coast to the other. So equipment is constantly analyzed and changed when needed.
Est-ce que le
Service in French, given the lack of staff, I know Mr. Cormier was very interested in this as well. Is there something we can hope to see? Will there be special attention in more francophone areas of Canada? Inaudible for the interpreter. There's the Search and Rescue Center in Quebec to have that francophone capacity, but we have coordinators for search and rescue, francophone ones or bilingual ones in Trenton and Halifax to cover parts of Quebec. But if you have a specific case, it would be a pleasure for me to follow up, but nothing has been brought to my attention.
Okay, thank you, Madame Desbiens. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair and Minister. It's so nice to see you back today with us at the committee. It was also nice to see you in my riding recently of Nanaimo Ladysmith. I do hope we can coordinate future visits. I have many people I'd love to introduce you to. I did ask about this a little bit, and I was hoping to get some updates and perhaps for you to expand a little bit on your answer. But we know in our BC waters here on the West Coast, we're seeing a rapid decline of Pacific wild salmon. And we know that in order to protect these wild salmon, we need to get open net pen fish farms out of our waters. Although we've been seeing steps in the right direction, we're still seeing proposals, for massive increases in fish farming in regions like that of Clayoquot Sound. With many of the fish farming licenses up for renewal in the next few weeks, we need a clear plan about how this government will meet its commitment by 2025. I'm wondering if you can clarify when we will see a clear plan to transition away from open net fish farms, and will this plan include moving away from in-water salmon farming in British Columbia?
Your question, and the protection of wild salmon is a total priority for British Columbians, and as we know, any manageable risk needs to be managed, and so that's one of the reasons for the transition away from open net pen salmon farming in coastal British Columbia waters. And I would say that that transition has actually begun already in the December 2020 decision not to renew licenses in the Discovery Islands area, and to have those net pens removed by summer of 2022. So yes, we have a critical path how we will move forward with this program. We're in consultation with the license holders, the Indigenous communities, and others on this, so that we move forward in a holistic and skillful way. And the decision on the current licenses that you mentioned will be occurring over the coming months. So there's no decisions to be made immediately, and those consultations are important to that. I am committed to a vision that this transition must include economic opportunities for communities to have the jobs and activities that they need. And so that's really why we need a responsible plan. And I think that attracting the capital to create a world-class sustainable technology aquaculture industry is the opportunity here. What are the technologies that don't provide any interface or risk or absolutely minimal? I mean, let's be the destination of choice for some of the sustainable aquaculture that's starting to emerge in other parts of the world today.
Thank you. You touched on it. Could you expand on whether we will be seeing funds set aside for workers specifically as they transition?
Well, we are in discussion with the provincial government. I've had a meeting with the provincial fisheries minister prior to this cabinet shuffle, and I've requested to meet with the new fisheries minister so we can talk about the set of things that have provincial and federal jurisdictional overlap. Yes, I'm interested in a just transition in this industry, and just what the detailed elements of the rest of the transition may be. We are working on that by consulting with the various partners and players who were affected by this.
Thank you, Minister. I want to make sure I have time for a third question here. So many questions to ask. I wanted to touch on the reallocation of crab fishing quotas to First Nations in an effort to reconcile the loss of traditional and constitutionally protected Indigenous rights to catch and sell fish on the west coast of British Columbia. And while we're seeing that there is agreement that First Nations rights must be honored to correct historical wrongs, there are frustrations on all sides about the lack of consultation with commercial fishers as well as First Nations. Commercial fishers shouldn't be bearing the costs of this decision. Will the government act quickly to fully compensate the impacted crab fishers for economic losses and invest in transitional supports so they may pursue other options for their livelihoods?
The answer is yes. We are working with the various parties. We have every intention to mitigate some of the impacts on the commercial harvesters. My understanding is that this will be a graduated transition, which provides time for us to really understand the full impacts and elements, and to provide some mitigation support. What is non-negotiable is that the local Indigenous communities have a right to fish for crab, and we cannot undermine our conservation values by just having that be added onto existing authorizations and licenses. So this transition it will be done carefully in discussion with all parties, and as fairly as possible.
Do I have time for one
The
further?
deputy
No,
may
actually, you're
have
gone
something to
over.
add to that.
We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less. But before I do, I'd like to remind members, if you're having a conversation with the person seated next to you, try to do it as quietly as possible. For some reason, it's very easy to hear it here at the head of the table, and the same way with some staff who, who are sitting close by. So I just want to remind members of that. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for appearing again today and with your members from your department. Minister, I noted in your opening remarks you've noted $36.8 million for the Pacific Strategic Salmon Initiative. I would take it that this is a priority for your department. In this committee's study of the flooding in BC, the committee heard that the Pacific PSSI would be the delivery program for to address the impacts of the flooding. And yet the committee has also heard that PSSI was being built from the ground up and not yet operational. It baffles me as to why a program that would be non-operational or not fully operational would be designated as a delivery program for actions that are needed now, not months down the road. Can you tell us today quickly what process of the Pacific Strategic Salmon Initiative development is at? How much of the $647 million has already been committed, and to what? And if the answer is lengthy, we can take that answer in writing, but I'd appreciate a brief breakdown today, please.
Thanks for that question, and I'm sure we can provide more detail in a written response. However, the $36.8 million is what is available through supplementary Cs when that gets voted on. That may not seem like, I mean, that's not a fifth of the total amount, which is closer to $750 million. But the important thing is to set things up in year one. And so that's what year one is about. The flood response is not waiting for us to set up the PSSI to respond. In fact, I've been part of the emergency committee that was set up, made of provincial and federal cabinet ministers, just days after the flood happened, so that we could work together and really identify all of the various impacts of those terrible floods on people, their business, on farms, and on habitat. My part of that is to make sure that the salmon habitat is considered, that our hatcheries are.
Thank you. I'll wait for the full
repaired.
response on how much has been committed already. Thank you very much. Recently, I put out an invitation for fish harvesters and others to provide me with questions that they would like asked. Justin from Falkland, in my riding of North Okanagan Shuswap, sent me this. He said, when will you implement UNDRIP and reinstate jurisdiction over fisheries and waterways to First Nations?
Well, I would tell Justin that is an ongoing process of looking at the rights Indigenous peoples have, and to ensure that they are involved in the fisheries and the economic opportunities they bring, as well as the processing sector. So we're very involved in that process on on all three coasts.
Okay, thank you. And reconciliation is a big part of that, and it's also a concern that's being raised by British Columbians, harvesters. They support reconciliation, but one identified that it is a national obligation. You've announced decisions under the auspices of reconciliation, and some of these have profound impacts on the harvesters. If you can agree that reconciliation is a national responsibility, do you think it's fair and appropriate that one group of Canadians, like the crab harvesters in BC or the Elver harvesters in the Maritimes, are responsible for bearing the cost of that reconciliation?
Well, you're right. I agree that reconciliation is a national responsibility, and we're doing that on all three coasts. And we are working with the industry on the transition of some of the licenses to the Indigenous communities. Those licenses don't come, they're not something that is a property owned by the current harvesters, but we want to make sure that this transfer, that that there are costs that are reflected that we provide for, and we're having those conversations on each of these matters, and perhaps the deputy has more to offer on that.
I'll move on to my next question. Very important to me in my riding in the interior of British Columbia, aquatic invasive species. In 2019, the Prime Minister issued the Fisheries Minister a mandate to make new investments to fight invasive species. Apart from adding a single full-time FTE at DFO Pacific, your previous Minister Jordan failed to deliver on her mandate. When will you, as Fisheries Minister, stand up for British Columbians and other provinces and finally deliver new investments to fight against aquatic invasive species in BC?
If we could get an answer in writing, it'd be great, as we've gone well over the 5-minute allotment, unfortunately. We'll now go to Mr. Badaway for 5 minutes or less, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Minister, for being here this afternoon or this morning. Madam Minister, since 2015, as you know, I've worked almost daily with colleagues and stakeholders to advance the government's Great Lakes agenda. You've been a part of that dialogue, your staff has, and I want to thank you for that. To be blunt, our government made several Great Lakes platform promises in both 2015 as well as 2019 that would be quite impactful to the basin. And I am anxious to move these commitments ahead, as you know. And your department, as I said earlier, has played and continues to play a big role. And I'm pleased to hear in your opening remarks that you are as well positioned, Madam Minister, to advance the government's agenda. But I would like to drill down on precisely what that means for the Great Lakes. And I would like to know more about your Great Lakes plan. The reason I want to get into the weeds in this is because DFO has not always had a focus on the Great Lakes. In fact, many Great Lakes stakeholders call the Great Lakes Canada's forgotten coast. With that, and because the Great Lakes rarely factor in government strategies on water and fisheries, as just one example, when you appeared at the committee on your mandate letter, the subject never even came up by yourself, your staff, or members of the committee. Not one of the members from any party asked about your Great Lakes role. Of course, some of this stems from the fact that despite the Great Lakes being home to an $8 billion, that's a B, fishery, there is not one MP from Ontario on the committee, which is unfortunate, and hence one of the reasons why I'm here today. This missing link means that there are policy and knowledge gaps in what is raised around the table with respect to the Great Lakes. For example, when the Blue Economy Strategy was first devised, it failed to account for anything other than Canada's coastal fisheries. And as I have raised with your department many times, not all fish swim in salt water. Ignoring the economic output of the Great Lakes is to ignore billions worth of untapped potential. And I was certainly pleased to see that you fixed that shortcoming in the most recent incarnation of the strategy. And I am hopeful that this awareness is foreshadowing what is to come, as once again we spoke about on many occasions, and once again I want to thank you for that. I say this all as a former mayor that sat and continues to sit on the Great Lakes as an MP, and who knows the triple bottom line implications of the Great Lakes, that being economic, environmental, and social cultural. 3,500 species of plants and animals, drinking water for millions, 238,000 jobs, and $50 billion worth of economic output should at the very least warrant serious consideration in this upcoming federal budget. The Great Lakes fishery alone is worth $8 billion, once again with a B, annually. Yet Canada has for 40 years fallen short on our promises to the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, something that I hope will be fully addressed once again in the upcoming budget. Minister, with all this as context, I have two simple questions. First off is, of the $243.2 million in new authorizations before us today, how much will be specifically allocated to Great Lakes projects and programming? And how will these new resources specifically advance your promise to advance the government's Great Lakes agenda? And secondly, can you point to the line in the supplemental estimate C or in any financial document brought before the committee that specifies the exact amount of our allocation to the Great Lakes Fishery Commission to support that binational organization and the work they do to protect the $8 billion Great Lakes fishery?
Well, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to thank the member for his tireless championing of the Great Lakes area, its people, its economy, and its environment. He's truly a champion for the Great Lakes. And I'm pleased that we as the Department of Fisheries and Oceans is involved in the Great Lakes Fisheries Commission to address the invasive species of sea lamprey, and in a successful way over many decades. I've talked about that already, so if there are specific answers to the quantitative requests that the member has, that we will provide that. What I do want to say is we are in freshwater fisheries across Canada is delegated to the provinces. I was in provincial environment, for example, many years ago, and the fisheries on the land aspect of them I was the delegated authority from DFO to do those activities and management. And so my guess is that the provinces that are involved with the Great Lakes, such as Ontario, have fisheries officers and others who are active in that regard. We do look after small craft harbors, and so there are harbors in some of our freshwater fisheries. And I will draw attention to our government's new national water strategy that Parliamentary Secretary Terry Duguid has announced recently, and that is a very timely and important way to look more holistically at Canada's fresh water, its environment, how its use, its protection, its importance economically, and have a framework for moving forward to have healthy, abundant fresh water as a nation, as we're known to have.
Thank you, Mr. Bedway. A little bit over time, but I want to make sure we get answers on the record when somebody starts to answer a question. We'll now go to Madame Debienne for 2.5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll ask you to ask the minister to have a look at my little fish, because we won't give up on the fish in the St. Lawrence. We have 2 fisheries to save, 2 heritage fisheries, and we need that date of April 1st for the survival of those 2 fisheries. So I want to draw the minister's attention and her colleagues' attention to say that we won't give up on the fish. So they have a lot before them, that there's nothing, well, that they're distinct fish between the St. Lawrence and Newfoundland. So I'm not asking for a response now, but I want to tell them that we'll be very active. I can give her a little fish for April 1st, our special date. Mr. Chair, I'd like to have the minister's comments or her officials' comments on the proportion of the $5.5 million. How will that be broken down to advance reconciliation on Indigenous rights and fisheries issues? I'd also like to know, if possible, in her perspective, what would be an appropriate level of fisheries?
Merci.
Thank you to the member for her question. I will ask my official to answer with numbers for that question on the $5.5 million. But I'd like to say for that April 1st date, we're using the best scientific data available in consultation with industry to determine the opening date for our fisheries season. And we're looking at scientific data, and it's important for that analysis to be concluded so we can make an informed decision on the opening date. That being said, we understand the importance for fishers in your riding to have a date soon. Thank you.
Gone just over time on that, so if we could get a written response for the numbers part of that question and answer, it'd be great. I'm trying to get in everything I can in this round. We'll now go to Ms. Barron for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask the Minister, looking towards the upcoming budget, I wanted to ask about how the Minister will move forward to ensure commercial fishing licenses are benefiting coastal communities, not foreign corporations. In the upcoming budget, will West Coast commercial fishers see a renewed commitment to ensuring beneficial ownership in our fishery remains in Canada and support for a West Coast owner-operator licensing model?
While I do support to the member, I do support economically viable and sustainable fisheries on all coasts. I want to thank the committee and MP Hardy, I know, had a big hand in this in having a study of the ownership structure of our fisheries on the West Coast. Our department is analyzing the various aspects of ownership structures so that we can look at what changes, if any, might be needed going forward. We want to make sure that the policy, any future policy, takes into consideration the needs, rights, and views of Indigenous groups, and that the policy solutions work for all British Columbians.
Thank you. I wanted to reiterate the timeliness of the second part of my question that I was asking about before. We're hearing from the BC Crab Association, and they're repeatedly explaining their frustration. And unfortunately, it's what we're hearing is that it is landing on deaf ears, that we're having their fishery access cut in half with no timely compensation or mitigation and no proper framework for consultation or table to negotiate a fair compensatory mechanism in place. We don't want to have families going bankrupt as a result of the inaction that is occurring or the decisions that are resulting. When will this be addressed? And, we know this allocation will come into effect on April 1st, and it's creating unnecessary division. Could you please speak to this and this very timely issue?
I would say to the member that sometimes court decisions, the timing of that is not in our control. And so the time may not be give us as much time as we would like, but we have to do this right, and that's what we're engaged with now, and the deputy may have some details to offer on that.
Just to say, Mr. Chair, that we've been meeting with the Crab Association. We've met with them many times since December. We've also met with the First Nations. I know, in fact, that the Crab Association and the First Nations have also had their own bilateral meetings. So, we are trying to work this issue out. It is certainly not true that we're not talking to people. We are talking to everybody here.
Thank you, Ms. Barron. We'll now go to Mr. Zimmer for 5 minutes or less, please.
Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister. And again, I gave you the questions that I'm going to ask you before the committee meeting, so I'll begin. The South Coast recreational salmon fishery is dying due to an exceedingly severe Chinook salmon management regime. Chinook non-retention regulations have been imposed across almost 100% of the Salish Sea inside and approach waters during the 4 peak fishing months for the past 3 years. You, as the Minister of Fisheries, have a mandate to sustain fisheries where reasonable, data-supported, and precautionary opportunities exist. Public salmon fisheries are the most economically important fisheries in BC, and Chinook salmon are the fundamental driver for these fisheries. During the 2021-2022 Integrated Fishery Management Plans consultation process, DFO withheld concerns over certain salmon stocks in Howe Sound and the Salish Sea from the Sport Fishing Advisory Board. As a result, the modest SFAB proposals that would have provided much-needed socioeconomic relief for southern BC in 2021, as well as aligned with the blue economy, were not supported or not approved due to undisclosed concerns. These previously undisclosed new concerns were finally made known to the Sport Fishing Advisory Board post facto. Through very recent meetings with your staff, proposals have been put forward that address those new concerns in Howe Sound, Pacific Fisheries Management Area 28, and Southeast Vancouver Island PFMAs 17, 18, and 19, as I previously asked you. These amended proposals, which were already ranked as low risk, provide even more protection for local and Fraser River stocks of concern. Minister Murray, when I previously asked you here at the Standing Committee if you were committed to working with the recreational fishery, you said yes. My question, will you recommend that these modest conservation-based proposals be implemented for April 1st, 2022?
Well, I'd like to thank the member for that question, and I have met with the representatives of the recreational fishers. I completely understand, as a coastal British Columbian who spends time on the water and in the Salish Sea islands, just how critical this is. I also understand that the recreational fishery is worth multiple times, I think it's 6 times the commercial salmon harvest, so very important economically as well. We are having discussions with the sport fishery, the recreational fishery representatives. I have met, the department knows that it is a priority for me that we give serious consideration to the
Thank
requests,
you, Minister.
and we are considering their proposals.
Okay. Thank you. I have
Those
to get
discussions aren't done yet.
So thank you, and I appreciate your working on it. Again, the question was, will it be implemented, not maybe or if. We need an answer, Minister. My next question. So far during the current integrated harvest planning process, senior DFO Pacific Region staff have informed the Sport Fishing Advisory Board they will not reopen the existing 2021-2022 salmon IFMP, which would result in a 4th year of severe socioeconomic hardship starting April 1st, 2022. I use this example for comparison. If sockeye showed up in harvestable numbers far more than anticipated, would DFO prevent the harvest of those fish because of doing so varied from the IFMP? The Sport Fish Advisory Board has met the department's new information requirement, and the SFAB has substantially adjusted their proposals based on this new information. My second question, Minister. Will you instruct your DFO Pacific Region senior staff to stop putting roadblocks in front of the public fishery advisors, open the IFMP, and adopt these extremely low-risk proposals?
The department is in discussions with the Sports Fisheries Advisory Board on these matters and takes their concerns and their proposals seriously. I do want to reinforce, though, just a broader context.
Minister, I have 30 seconds, so I'll ask my last question.
Okay.
Sorry. Is Rebecca Reed and other Pacific Region senior staff in charge of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, or are you?
I think the member knows the answer to that question. The minister makes these decisions with the best advice of the scientists and the staff that work for DFO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zimmer. We'll now try and fit in Mr. Hardy for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to the Minister. A letter is coming your way that represents some really good work by everybody on this committee. As we looked at the implications of the flooding in the Fraser Valley, basically the difficulty that salmon have in reaching a lot of very good habitat that has been traditionally cut off by flood control mitigation. So I would ask that once the minister gets this letter, that we receive a fulsome response to this committee on the recommendations and the findings in that letter. You mentioned the Bly Island issue that was went back to 1968. I want to go back to 2016 and the Nathan A. Stewart tugboat sinking, which unleashed a great deal of diesel into the water. One of the issues at that time was the lack of consultation and the use of traditional knowledge from First Nations in order to manage that whole issue. And so I wanted to basically find out in your planning and in your mandate letter how much of the First Nations knowledge, et cetera, will be factored into future strategies that come out of the DFO and your ministry. And specifically, I would like the minister to comment on work that was done or proposed to be done at the Kitsilano Coast Guard base which this government rescued from being closed, but there was supposed to be training there for First Nations communities in rescues, in all of the things that needed to be responded to when a mishap happened along the coast. So I hope that wasn't too convoluted a question for the minister, but I'd appreciate her answer.
Thank you. Question and to the member, and that was indeed a disastrous situation, and that the member referred to with the spill, the sinking. That's one of the key focuses of our ocean protection plan, is to put in place the capacity for Indigenous communities to be guardians of the waters, their traditional waters, to have the craft and the equipment and the training to be able to identify problems and respond very quickly. And I will say that with the Zim Kingston incident, the first call that went out from the incident commander was the local Indigenous communities, and they were partners in the spill response throughout. So we're going to be building on those the capacity to respond, but it's already been hugely increased by the $1.5 billion ocean protection plan. And perhaps the commissioner has some more granular response to the way the Kitsilano Coast Guard base, which we reinstated and expanded, whether that's being used for Indigenous training.
Yes, thank you, Minister. Yes, indeed, we have many Indigenous training program that came to light with OPP, and we're very successful. And a good example of this is at the end of the first training session, people went back home, and the morning after there was a search and rescue incident around Tofino, and the person got the call, jumped in their boat, and went and saved that person. So the very first training session translated into saving a life. So we put a lot of emphasis on this. So Kitsilano is fully operational, and it's been one of the busiest search and rescue station so far.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. I'd like to cut it off there if that's okay. We're all out of time for the first hour. I want to say thank you to the Minister and, of course, our officials for appearing today once again. And we'll recess for a couple of minutes to swap out attendees here at committee. So again, thank you very much. So we're going to be a little bit short on time on this one, but we'll try and get as much of it in as we can. We will now resume our second panel, of course. I'd like to make a few comments for the information for our new witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. Members may also identify from which witness they would like a response. When you're ready to speak, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic. When you are not speaking, your mic must be on mute. A reminder again that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, French or English. Please inform me immediately if interpretation is lost and we'll ensure it is restored. When speaking, please speak clearly and slowly. I would now like to welcome our witnesses today. We have from the Canadian Border Services Agency, and if I mispronounce your name, I do apologise. We have Sean Hogue, Director General, Commercial Programme. We have Lydia Lebert, Director, Programme and Policy Management. And from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, we have a Mr. Doug Forsyth, Director General, Market Access. And as an individual, we have Carmen Sotelo, and I apologize if I got that wrong, researcher with Spanish National Research Council. We'll now hear opening statements, beginning with the Canadian Service Board Agency for 5 minutes or less, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Honourable Chair and Honourable Members. I'm here today to speak to you about the CBSA's role within the management of the fisheries, and specifically the areas that concern the crossing of the border. I first want to say thank you to the committee for the opportunity to contribute to the committee's examination of the traceability of fish and seafood products, and to speak to the CBSA's role in this process. And while I cannot outline all aspects of the process in terms of what other government departments are responsible for, I can speak to this process from the perspective of the Border Services Agency. The CBSA facilitates the flow of legitimate trade and enforces more than 100 acts and regulations that keep our country and Canadians safe. In terms of fish and seafood importation, the CBSA plays a role in delivering the program by verifying that other government department requirements are met for seafood being imported and exported to and from Canada, as well as administering the Customs Act. The policies governing the importation of fish, seafood products, and shellfish are established by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Environment and Climate Change Canada. The CBSA works closely with these other government departments to support them and ensure that fish and seafood importations are compliant with the established policies. These activities primarily include verifying that any required licenses, permits, certificates, or other documentation required to import the goods to Canada are provided, while also ensuring that appropriate duties and taxes are remitted by the importers. The CBSA assists the CFIA by enforcing the policies that govern the importation of food, plants, and animals into Canada to the extent that these policies apply at Canadian border points of entry. Currently, imported fish and seafood products are regulated by the Safe Food for Canadians Act and the Health of Animals Act, and their accompanying regulations. The CBSA assists Fisheries and Oceans Canada with enforcement of the aquatic invasive species regulations, the import prohibition on shark fins, and assists with the trade tracking of certain species of tuna, swordfish, touchfish, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. The majority of commercial importation of foods are regulated by CFA and must meet the CFIA requirements to be eligible for entry. Import requirements vary depending on a variety of factors, including the commodity, country, or U.S. state from which they are being imported. These import requirements can be found by consulting the CFIA's automated import reference system. High-risk goods require a review and approval by the CFIA's National Import Service Center before they can be released by the Border Services Agency into Canada. In addition, certain high-risk goods require inspection by CFIA before they can be released. The CBSA at the border releases, refers for inspection, or refuses entry of goods based upon the recommendation provided by the CFIA. When the CBSA discovers goods suspected of non-compliance with other government department legislation, such as that of CFIA, they are detained under Section 101 of the Customs Act and referred to the responsible department or agency for further inspection and, if necessary, enforcement. The CBSA does not inspect food for the purposes of verifying quality standards, labeling requirements, or do we undertake any testing for compliance with these other federal requirements. In the context of traceability, importers are obligated to accurately describe the commodities, including fish and seafood, and their country of origin on the commercial import documentation. The level of description required depends on the legislative and regulatory requirements for that specific product. The CBSA is also responsible for administering the customs tariff. As part of that mandate, the agency is responsible for ensuring the proper tariff classification for goods being imported. The proper tariff classification on seafood importations at the border is complex, and there's little means for us to visually distinguish between various types of seafood at the time of importation. Based on this limitation, the CBSA employs a risk-based post-importation verification program that relies on the books and records verification of import documents, such as purchase orders and accounting documents. Such verifications may be conducted in cases where seafood mislabeling is suspected. For example, in 2018, such verifications of seafood for tariff classification detected seafood fraud resulting from mislabeling and misclassification of large shipments of roasted eel fillets. One such tariff classification verification resulted in a reassessment of $136,500, which the importer then had to pay. Further, the CBSA provides the importing community with advanced rulings that confirms the appropriate classification to use when the goods are imported. Over the last 5 years, the CBSA has issued 7 advanced rulings to importers to assist in their compliance at the time of importation of the various seafood products. The CBSA recognizes that Canada's efforts with respect to traceability of fish and seafood products. We take our role in this seriously and will continue to support the Government of Canada's efforts to address this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogue. We'll now go to Mr. Forsyth from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development for 5 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak with committee members today in the context of the committee's study on fish and seafood products traceability. Mr. Chair, I understand the committee has already heard from colleagues representing the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, who are the key governmental bodies responsible for seafood and traceability and safety. I hope I'll be able to complement the information you receive from them and answer your questions as they pertain to Global Affairs Canada's mandate, in particular with respect to international trade obligations. Le secteur de la politique commerciale.
The Trade Policy and Negotiations branch of Global Affairs Canada is responsible for the development and implementation of Canadian trade policy, including leading all international trade negotiations and administering Canada's free trade agreements. The branch is also responsible for litigation and dispute settlement, as well as the administration of import and export controls under the Export and Import Permits Act.
Access Bureau, which I lead, looks after certain issues of trade policy and negotiation, namely market access for both manufactured and agricultural products in collaboration with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, government procurement, trade and environmental issues, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and technical barriers and regulations. I understand that certain issues that have been raised in the context of the committee's study to date may have an international trade dimension. These include labeling requirements, including country of origin labeling, or COOL, international standards, regulatory alignment and cooperation, as well as certain trade aspects of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. I'm happy to do my best to respond to questions you have today. In completing my introductory remarks, I would simply wish to offer a general observation about how Canada's international trade obligations function as something to keep in mind as the committee develops recommendations for Canadian Traceability Program. The core of Canada's international trade obligations is that foreign and domestic producers be treated the same way, subject to the same rules and the same conditions of competition. This means that any new measures and compliance procedures that Canada could develop with respect to fish and seafood products and applied to imported products will also need to apply similarly to Canadian products. Thank you, and I will look forward to your answering any questions you may have.
Thank you. We'll now go to Ms. Sotelo for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans for inviting me to participate as witness in this session. I'm here as a coordinator of 2 EU projects, labeled fish and sea traces, that were funded by Interreg Atlantic program here in Europe. And these 2 projects were related with seafood labeling and traceability. I work with the Spanish National Research Council, which has different research institutes devoted to the ocean and its resources. And in the case of my institute, which is the Marine Research Institute in Vigo, here in Spain, we have been working in seafood fraud for more than 30 years. And in particular, we have been developing analytical tools for fighting seafood fraud. Obviously, this work has been done in collaboration with other European research institutions. I'm not going to mention all of them. What I have to say is that during all these years, we have analyzed many seafood commercial samples with different processing levels, and we have been looking for mislabeling and in particular for species misrepresentation. And although we didn't conduct a proper, from a statistical point of view, market study about fraud, we have observed that the seafood fraud at retailers, both in Spain and in Europe, have been decreasing over the time since 1990s when we started to work in this topic. And we think that the following reasons may explain this decrease. We think that developing analytical tools to authenticate and also being these methods easy to implement and with a reasonable price have been supporting this decrease. We think also that consumer and industry awareness about the impact of seafood fraud has also an explanation of the decreasing of fraud. And finally, of course, enforcement and control by authorities that has been put in place in Europe during these years has also it is also a strong reason for this decrease. However, we have identified some aspects that need further attention and that we were focusing on in our recent projects. I have mentioned before, label fish and sea traces. I'm going to name them very quickly. We think that the lack of harmonization and standardization of the current methods to control misrepresentation, especially species and geographic origin, it's needed still, because even though there has been a lot of effort to develop these methods and to build databases, we think that there is not enough coordination in the purpose of harmonization, harmonization and standardization. Also, we think that developing fast and easy to perform analytical tools for some of the main issues with seafood misrepresentation, such as species or geographic origin or populations, are needed, and also from other information that is required by the European law, such as the declaration of the presence of water or declaration of injection of aqueous solutions in some seafood products, or not declaring some processes such as freezing or even tools for differentiation of wild versus farmed seafood. We think also there is some important aspect that should be addressed, and that is the increase of consumer awareness about the impact of labeling and traceability on fisheries sustainability. And also the impact that the application of these 2 tools have on decreasing IUU fisheries damage. So this is another important aspect that we think that should be addressed. Developing digital tools for helping stakeholders, fishermen, industry to implement full chain traceability in the seafood sector should be also an important aspect to consider. And finally, improving cooperation among different government agencies, and especially in the case of Europe, different countries. We are a number of countries with the same regulation, and we think that we should collaborate on this. And especially, but this can be extended to other parts of the world, especially about new types of fraud incidents, and also the types and specific analytical tools to be used for fighting this fraud. I thank you for your attention, and I will be open to questions from you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that, Ms. Sotelo. And before we go to questioning, I will say please accept the condolences of all the committee on a Spanish fishing trawler that had a pretty large loss of life off the coast of Newfoundland, my home province, recently. So again, our condolences to you and everybody involved in
Thank you very much.
Particular
in fact,
incident.
That ship was for very near from here. Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll now go to questioning. We'll start off with Mr. Perkins for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my first couple of questions are for, if I pronounce it correctly, because I'm relying on your pronunciation, Ms. Sotelo. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We've heard some testimony here from some of the Canadian associations that are concerned about the barrier in their research that has shown that they believe that pricing increases resulting from labeling may be a barrier to consumption of seafood products in Canada. And I know that the University of Maine has conducted some research and found that actually in Europe, when the seafood labeling products have been improved in their retail labeling, that in fact it's actually increased consumption and willingness to consume. So I'm wondering if you could comment, as Europe has increased its retail and consumer knowledge in terms of what's on the label, has there been an increase in consumption and sales?
I don't know what to answer, because this is a difficult question, because it's not the labeling regulation is not equally implemented in all the types of retailers. We have conducted a study in our project Sea Traces that we saw that, for instance, in local fishmongers and markets, which are small and public markets of seafood, the level of labeling is very poor, because this type of retailers rely in the trust of the consumers to buy the fish. However, in the case of supermarkets and big retailers, the level of compliance is really high. And I think that took a little bit of time to be accepted. And now I think consumers, because when you buy seafood, especially fresh seafood, you have to trust a lot the person who is selling you the fish. In the case of a small fishmonger, could be easy to know the person, but in the case of supermarkets, this is not easy anymore. So you have to rely in the labels, and people is accepting the labels. I believe that this also has an increase in price, but not very dramatic, I guess.
Thank you very much. Again, for Ms. Sotelo, I don't know if you know much about the Canadian labeling system, so I'll start, though, by sharing with you, in the opening statement by the Executive Director of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency here, she stated that Canada is recognized as having one of the best food and safety systems in the world, and has implemented robust food safety traceability requirements. I don't know if you've looked at what we do in Canada, but do you believe on the seafood side that we do, if you're all knowledgeable, have one of the are recognized as one of the best food safety systems?
Well, I don't know exactly the system that you have there. I believe that food safety should be, like in other Occidental countries, very high standard. But my expertise is more related with seafood labeling and not so much with seafood safety. I'm sorry, I don't really know about the regulations in Canada about this.
Yeah, and I guess that's the point at which I've sort of come through our study, is that our requirements under the Canadian Food Inspection Agency are more about food safety than they are about consumer knowledge and transparency at the consumer side, because one of essentially the basic regulations in Canada are that the labeling requirements are only the common name of the fish, the name and place of the business, not where it was caught, and a lot number code identifier, I guess, in case traceability on food safety back through the supply chain is required if there's a problem. But all of the things that we seem to see as required in Europe are not required here in Canada. So, for example, my understanding is not only is the name of the food required and the list of ingredients, but the possible name of any allergens in Europe are required, the quantity of certain ingredients by category, the net quantity of food, the weight, the date and minimum durability of the use by better use by product, special storage conditions, name of business and name and address like we do here in Canada, country of origin or place of provenance of the seafood, instructions for the use, nutrition, date of freezing, frozen unprocessed fish products, the commercial and scientific name, the production method, the catch area, including the FAO fishing area which it was catched, farmed, whether it's farmed or not, the fishing gear used, whether the product has been defrosted previously, and the minimum date of durability. Those are quite extensive rules required on packaging, which presumably in Europe leads to greater transparency and understanding of the consumer what they're actually buying, whereas ours doesn't do that. Can you just comment a little? Was Europe previous to this doing basically what we're doing now, and you've evolved from that system of very limited labeling?
Yes, you're right, and I think that further, I mean, you have mentioned the more extensive way of labeling seafood. We have different categories of seafood and different requirements. I think that this is a little bit messy because if you have to buy a fresh seafood, you may, and it's packaged, you may require many of the items that you have described there. But if you buy canned tuna, you are not going to need to put the scientific name on the can. So there is a bit different speeds in the regulation implementation because not all of them requires the same. So we started, as you mentioned, only with commercial names, and this has been evolving during the years towards a more the inclusion of more information in the seafood products. I don't particularly think that maybe this is all needed, but there are a lot of, I think that the regulations here in Europe are very much influenced by by many NGOs and many consumers associations that require that all this information is needed because of for sustainable reasons. So, I don't know if I have explained it good.
Thank you very much. I think my time's well over.
Oh yeah, somebody will suffer at the end. We'll now go to Mr. Hardy for 6 minutes or less is the key word there.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Perkins. To Mr. Hogue, it would appear from your description of the CBSA's activities and scope that there's still quite a reliance on the Canada Food Inspection Agency and the focus on the safety of the product. But Knowing that the CBSA employs what you would call a risk management strategy for inspecting goods coming into the country, because you can't look at every container that ends up in port. I don't want you to identify anybody, but I want to know if, generally speaking, when we're looking at importers, have we identified and flagged high-risk products, high-risk origins, and high-risk importers? In light of people who might try and bend or break the rules.
Thank you for your question. As part of the CBSA's processing at the borders, we received information from the importers into our automated systems in advance of the product arriving. That information is then used for us to conduct a risk assessment, and all goods that are arriving in Canada are risk assessed. And yes, we do track who are the high-risk importers across a range of goods, based on history, what we would need to pay attention to when goods come to crossing the border. When that documentation is received, it's also forwarded to the Canada Food Inspection Agency, and we rely on their determination or recommendation as to whether the goods should be allowed in. That doesn't remove the ability for our officers at the border to exercise their discretion with respect to specific goods, or for us to detain goods until we receive we are fully satisfied with respect to the goods meeting the other government department requirements. In addition
I'll have to. Okay. If you have something more to add, something in writing would be very, very useful, Mr. Hogue, because again, our time is limited here for questions, and I appreciate your input. I'm sorry, I didn't capture the name of our foreign affairs witness, but sir, when we have trade agreements with other countries, and we have our trade policy, is there a reasonable expectation that our trade partners, our foreign trade partners, will exercise due diligence in following and tracking the things that are important to Canada, such as the IUU fishery, which is horribly damaging to species and to the environment, as well as seafood fraud, which tends to be a growing issue. Do we have those expectations, and do we, if you like, assess performance of those expectations? I think we may have lost him. I don't see him on the screen.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair.
Oh, there we are.
I apologize, I dropped off. I think I caught most of your question. Yeah, sorry, I dropped off. I was having some internet connection problems. So I think I caught all of your question. Just in response, I think when we enter into free trade negotiations with a partner, we absolutely assess kind of before we get to the negotiating table. That's part of our due diligence is to assess what kind of agreement is possible in various negotiating tables, including some of the ones you mentioned, whether it's under the environment or writ large under market access. And so certainly we look at a number of different issues, and then when we sit down at the table with our counterparts, it's very much the case that we'll look at areas of commonality, look at areas where we can move forward together, and I'm thinking specifically of the CETA, the Canada-European Economic Agreement, where we do had common objectives. We were able to achieve them in a number of different areas, whether it's the environment, labor, et cetera. And so before we would negotiate with anyone, we would ideally like to have a common set of objectives for sure.
If you have some concerns, do you talk to the CBSA?
Well, we absolutely work very closely with our CBSA colleagues and as well as other government departments, frankly. As we go forward in a negotiation, we want to make sure that we are, there will be some differences, frankly, between Canada and whoever we're negotiating with. And that is part of those are part of the things that you would settle at the negotiating table. But we definitely work with our other government departments, including, I would add, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as CFIA that have also appeared here.
Ms. Sotelo, you mentioned that you've really made some progress on the issue of seafood fraud through the use of analytical tools. Can you give us a bit more detail of what those analytical tools might be?
Yeah, well, the gold standard nowadays is Sanger sequencing, DNA sequencing. So this, I think that that was a breakthrough when we started to implement that in the routine analysis of seafood. We have a big difference between the previous fraud and the fraud that we found after that.
So mentioned that.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. You're not going. It's about 5 seconds left. You're not going to get in your question, let alone the answer. We'll now go to Madame Desbiens for 6 minutes or less, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question would be for Mr. Hogue from the Canada Border Services Agency and to Mr. Forsyth of the Department of Foreign Affairs. It's very concerning when we know that 90% of our fisheries resources go abroad and meet very high standards, but we consume products of lesser quality because the criteria are lower or there are lower standards for traceability. What can we do to change the situation to reassure our consumers of seafood products? As quickly as possible, please.
Thank you for the question. The criteria for changing how the seafood is analyzed or reported would fall within the regime set by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency or by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And at the Border Services Agency, we would be implementing that at the border. So I would defer to those other departments in terms of responding to how specifically you might change the criteria with respect to traceability. Thank you.
Est-ce que quelqu'un d'autre?
Would somebody else like to add something? I have another question if not.
No, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I think that my colleague handled it very well.
So in that same vein, in our study for a number of weeks, we've heard from witnesses, and it seems that a consultation table, a working table or a working group representing professional associations of fishers, DFO, CFIA, and you, for example, and perhaps Ms. Sotelo could join that group so that we can prepare a plan that's coordinated, that will be implemented, and there would be an organization that would lead all of this, like a traceability commissioner or an auditor general of labeling. And after that consultation, there would be a way to improve traceability. That seems to be what we're uncovering with our study. What do you think, and would you be interested in participating in that working group?
Thank you for the question. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to comment on the specific nature of a working group, but what I would say is the CBSA meets actively with most of our government partners. We provide them advice on a regular basis, and depending on the form or the method that's developed, we would participate and provide advice and border expertise as it's required within whatever that form is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe perhaps I could add a little bit to my colleague's answer and just echo his comments and say that Global Affairs Canada participates regularly and works cooperatively with other government departments on a range of issues, including the development of regulations and standards. And we would be happy to continue to do that in the form necessary and under the mandate that we have in terms of providing advice on whether these said standards and regulations are consistent with our international trade obligations.
Est-ce qu'il y aurait pour vous
would there be openness from you on the idea that we lack coordination in implementing some rules so that we could have everyone participate in that exercise to prepare a plan to improve a number of things?
I guess I can jump in and answer that. The CBSA is always open to consultation. We consult regularly with industry of importers, brokers, across a range of goods that are coming in. And depending again on the lead departments and how they would wish to approach it, we would support that as best we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, just to echo my previous comments, I think the Global Affairs Canada has a role to play as a key member, as an important member of the development of regulations for the Government of Canada, and we are absolutely pleased to do that. And as my colleague said, in conjunction with the lead departments, and however they decide to proceed with that.
Est-ce qu'une je dirais
Would there be openness from Europe to this working group to complement our work?
This question is for me. I didn't understand. Yeah, no problem. Mm-hmm.
Alors, Monsieur le Président, est-ce que
Mr. Chair, may I continue my question, or have I gone beyond the time?
There's only about 12 seconds left, so I don't think you're going to get much of a question in, let alone an answer. So
J'aimerais savoir si.
I'd like to know.
Okay.
Ouais, j'aimerais savoir.
I'd like to know if the European contribution can contribute to the table for this working group.
And I believe Ms. Sotelo said yes, they would be willing to participate in that working group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll go on now to Ms. Barron for 6 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. My first question, I was hoping to hear from Mr. Forsyth. And specifically, I wanted to ask about, we know that we get a significant amount of seafood into Canada from the United States. And I'm wondering if you can expand a little bit on any initiatives in place to help make sure programs are safely tracked across our borders. And do you think a collaborative approach would be helpful in these processes?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I think that probably is not maybe not best directed at me. I think we just to upfront, yes, we do trade a lot of fish products between Canada and the United States, as we do a lot of other products, but fish absolutely. But the Global Affairs Canada is not involved with any programs or administration of things that cross the border. So, or at least in terms of that particular product. So I might turn to one of my colleagues if they have any other information to add there.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth. Yes, if there, Mr. Hogg, if this is something you might be able to better answer. If not, I'll move on to my next question.
I guess.
Apologize.
From a border perspective, of course, the rules that the U.S. applies and the rules and regulations that we apply in Canada can be quite different. We certainly speak with the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol to make sure that the ports of entry are functioning smoothly. But with respect to specific regulations and requirements, that again would be the responsibility of the Food Inspection Agency or Fisheries and Oceans. We would just make sure that it moves smoothly through the border based on what they've defined as the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm wondering, Ms. Sotelo, if you could expand a little bit. You had mentioned in your opening statements the need for greater cooperation between partners. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit around your thoughts on how helpful it would be to make sure that illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing is addressed to support this cooperation between partners.
Well, my statement was referred more to the fighting of fraud through fighting misrepresentation of seafood, because we think that at least in Europe and even in countries like in Spain that are not very big, we have different administrations that not necessarily talk between each other. So sometimes you find that there is a cooperation in terms of analytical methods. They are not using the same methods in Europe. We have performed, the European Commission have performed a study in 1915 about in 2015 about seafood labeling across Europe, and there were many different techniques, and control labs were not speaking the same language. So I refer to that, and that could be applied to other things like traceability and other aspects of labeling and traceability. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps I'll go back to Mr. Hogue. And I'm wondering, one of the key recommendations that we've heard from a number of stakeholders is around developing a task force or a committee between departments and agencies to help ensure that gaps are being addressed. And I'm wondering if the Canadian Border Services Agency would play a key part in that, and what technical perspective you think that this agency would bring to the table.
Thank you for the question. As the Border Services Agency, we would bring our expertise in how goods are imported or exported out of Canada, and the penalties and enforcement regime that are available under the Customs Act. But we would do that in support of the lead departments, as they would be well positioned or better positioned to lead any discussion about what the exact requirements are and the regime of traceability that they would like to see put in place. And then we would make sure that actually happens technically at the border.
Great, thank you. And I guess, do you agree with the importance of having this in place?
I think that, as a Border Services Agency, we're always interested in discussions with our other government departments that are focused on strengthening the safety and security of Canada and the health of Canadians, and we do that on a regular basis. If those departments chose to use a task force type of model or some type of model, we would continue to support them in that as far as it reaches back to our mandate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And Ms. Sotelo, oh my goodness. I'm becoming notoriously bad at pronouncing people's names. I apologize. My next question, I was wondering, one of the suggestions we heard was that potentially mislabeled fish products could be given PCR tests, similar to what we see with COVID screening, to quickly confirm that a product is what it was labeled as. And can you speak a little bit to how the EU has been doing this enforcement, and are there best practices, that you think that we could incorporate?
I think that the gold standard here is still DNA sequences, which is not the same as the test that you have mentioned, PCR test. But we have developed. I mean, there are many methods that have been developed to implement sort of this type of methodologies also in the seafood sector. Is more complicated because, as you know, that we have many different species in the seafood market, in a global seafood market. So it's not easy as it is with the case of the COVID, for instance. But yeah, there are methods implemented.
Yeah, perhaps a bit of an oversimplification, but thank you of the similarity of the test. Thank you. And
thank you, Ms. Barron. Thank you, Ms. Barron. You're going a little bit over. We'll now go to Mr. Arnold for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for the witnesses today. My questions will be for Mr. Hogue and Mr. Forsyth initially here. To both of you, representatives of the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Department of Fisheries and Oceans have appeared as witnesses in this study. I've asked those witnesses if they saw how eliminating IUU, or illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries, through traceability could benefit conservation and mitigate unacceptable labor conditions and affect how Canadians buy their food. Neither the CFIA or DFO officials answered the question directly and said that preventing fish and seafood caught illegally or with unacceptable labor conditions, such as slavery, was, quote, outside of their mandate. So to Mr. Hogue and Mr. Forsyth, does CBSA or the Department of Foreign Affairs have any mandates that would cause them to be concerned or take action about fish and seafood caught illegally or with unacceptable labor conditions, such as slavery? Mr. Hogue first.
We're always concerned about illegal goods that are entering the country. And we do that at all of our border ports of entry on a regular basis. Our officers are well trained to identify products. In addition to that, the data that is provided to us helps us identify high-risk importers. And then as those products cross, we can detain them and work with CFIA to make sure that they don't make it to market. With respect to the labor conditions aspect of it, the CBSA is involved in Canada's Emerging Forced Labor program, and we are working with ESDC and other government departments, again, in our role of supporting to make sure that when goods hit the border, they are detained, seized, or forfeited if they don't comply with our labor standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Forsyth.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I could perhaps add a bit to my colleague's intervention. I think first off, just in terms of IUU fishing, Department of Global Affairs Canada does not have a mandate to manage that or to deal with that. And then I would just add and echo my colleague's comments with respect to labor standards and participation of Global Affairs Canada in the along with our colleagues from ESDC, CBSA, and a couple other departments as working, doing our best to manage that issue and to make sure that labor standards are enforced with respect to trading goods imported into Canada, including fish products.
Thank you. So maybe back to Mr. Hogue, to identify those products that may be IUU, achieved through IUU fisheries, do you have a mandate through your department to identify those potential products? Or who do you rely on for information as you do your inspections at the border?
So I guess to lay this out, how it works at the border, we would receive the data ahead of time from legitimate importers or brokers, our automated systems, and our analysts then review the goods that are coming into Canada, of which fish would be one. So if there was illegal fish coming in, it's unlikely they would have all of the permits and requirements and documents that CFIA requires legitimate traders to have. CFIA would then signal to us that specific shipments should be held and follow-up action taken, whether that's some type of enforcement regime, some type of compliance approach. But we would do it in partnership with CFIA.
Thank you. And again, for both of you, is there a central forum for which your organizations work with the Government of Canada and organizations like DFO, CFI in developing traceability systems? That's for Mr. Hogue and Mr. Forsyth. Mr. Hogue first.
I'm not aware of any centralized discussion focused uniquely on traceability that the CBSA participates in, but we do have frequent bilateral discussions with CFIA, with DFO regarding their specific regulations and how we apply them at the border. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that, Mr. Chairman, similarly, we are not, to the best of my knowledge, involved in any type of ongoing development with CFIA and with DFO on traceability at this time.
Thank you. Maybe one quick one for Mrs.
Well, actually, you're gone 30 seconds over, so there'll be no quick one today unless you're doing it yourself. I'll now go to Mr. Hanley to close us out for today for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you. What an honor. A la señora Sotelo, muchas gracias para su presencia con nosotros. Thank you very much for being with us today. First questions for you. I'm interested in, congratulations on all the progress that's been made in the EU, and I think there's much to emulate and to strive for. One of the aspects I'm interested in is the cooperation with industry, and what could you comment on the amount of regulation versus cooperation, voluntary cooperation with industry, and how that might have evolved over the years and what role that played.
Muchas gracias, Mr. Hanley. Yeah, my experience is that at the beginning was not too much cooperation because they were very afraid of these things going to decrease their economic benefit. But at the end, they realized that over the years, they realized that traceability and good labeling was helping them, in fact, because their products can be more reliable to consumers and the price could be higher. So we have a lot of response nowadays in terms of industry involvement in this. I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, certainly. A smaller question. I noticed that you discussed label fish, and that as part of the traceability program. Now that's focused on Atlantic region. So I assume that that because this is an EU program, what applies in one ocean, there are similar. There's harmonization, I guess, between different seas or oceans within EU jurisdiction.
Yes, of course. This is something is more related with the program. This funds projects in Atlantic region, which are more intensive in terms of fisheries, and that is the reason why it was funded by them. But the regulation is the same for all the fisheries in Europe. Yeah.
Thank you. And if I may continue with you for a little bit, I note that you noted also that there isn't a lot of data to assess the analysis of trends over the years, but that you noted that that seafood fraud declined over the years, and I was wondering whether that's a gap that you have identified, that sort of maybe a lack of analytical capacity to actually assess progress, and if that's one of the projects for the future.
I don't think I quite understood very well your question. We did notice that when we started to work, there were not almost easy to implement analytical tools, and there was a lot of fraud in the retailers in the market. And when we developed these DNA techniques about in the decade of 2000 and so on, we noticed that the industry knew that that could be done, and then things started to change. But I don't know if this I get your question right. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think it was more how you measure the effects, like.
Okay. Yeah, that is something that we received a lot of samples at the beginning, and we were seeing numbers like 50-60% of mislabeling, which it's really rampant fraud. And nowadays we are seeing numbers of 5-6%, depending on the type of seafood, really, because this is a very huge market of the very different things. For instance, we determined that in the case of bluefin tuna, Atlantic bluefin tuna, the fraud here in Europe, in particular in Spain, could be as high as 100%, which is really high.
That kind of concludes our questioning in the second hour of our committee. A couple of things. I of course want to say thank you to our witnesses who have appeared today and gave up their time to provide such valuable information. I want to say thank you to the interpreters, the translation team, the analysts, and of course the clerk. But a couple of things I want to remind people of. Tuesday's committee meeting will have a 15-minute in-camera session at the end for drafting instructions and the traceability of fish and seafood product study. On another note, I just want to remind members that try and do your best to be here on time. I grant that wasn't the reason why we were late or lost 10 minutes today, but we did make up for it. But if you're not here, we still have to start the meeting. There's time limitations on us, so I would ask members to be diligent in showing up on time, regardless on what side of the table you're sitting. I want to start on time, make sure everybody gets their rounds of questioning.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
1 second now before I before I finish. I want to say as well, like today we had the minister in for an hour. An hour doesn't give a lot of time, and even though there was only one 5-minute opening statement, it doesn't allow for a lot of questioning sometimes, especially when we start a little bit late. I will say that if anybody didn't get a chance to ask their question to the minister, maybe they could submit them in writing, and I'm sure the minister would be only too glad to respond, and we could include that in our report or study or whichever we present to the House at the end of the day. Mr. Zimmer, on your point of order.
Yeah, I just, speaking up for my colleague today, I mean, there was quite a long time to get going. And, you know, my colleague was just getting up to ask the next question, and the time was over.
Yeah, and actually to that point,
yeah.
The meeting started at 11:03. We didn't get underway actually until 11:12, so we had a 9-minute delay. We added 12 minutes here at the end to make up for that. So both sessions had their hour of time. Now, it's hard. The clerk advised me that we could add that on today. There are days we can't because time is tight. And we couldn't go beyond this time today because time was tight for the people who are doing the services provided for this actual committee meeting.
And I know as a former chair, I know it's nice to be able to have people finish questions, et cetera, but I think it's also imperative that the people that are on the queue to ask a question get their chance. So we've seen some of the questions, they go long, and that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, but on an hour, we'll never get through all the rounds of people to ask questions. It's impossible in an hour session. And I will say that to the point of if we saved a little time on each question, I keep track of every person that's questioning whether they go over or under on time. And like there's times, and I'm not picking on Mr. Perkins for this, but it went 1 minute and 45 seconds over and a 6-minute allotment of time. If there's time to ask a question, I like the witness to have time to answer it. But we've got to be cognizant of that. It's fine to complain about somebody not getting enough time when somebody else is chewing up that time. So if you add it all up, Mr. Small probably would have had time to answer a question, or another member. That was on this one. There wasn't on the last one, but it's not uncommon for people to go over. I've got it written down like 27 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 18 seconds, 32 seconds, 15 seconds, and 25 seconds. So you got 2 or 3 minutes there in time lost to another member because other members went a little bit over or the answer went a little bit over. So if you want me to be sharp or right to the second on the time, I can do that. But you may not get an answer from a witness, or you might just get asked a question.
Just a final comment then. You know, we've asked before, and this is why we've asked to have the minister for 2 hours previous times, is because it's so important that she's here to answer questions.
Yeah.
And so when this one opportunity comes about, and Mr. Small had his chance to just sort of evaporate, I guess I would just ask, because we are the official opposition and should and deserve the rightful time.
Well,
to ask the minister
every
questions.
committee member actually deserves their time. Every member.
But what's happening right now is
I can't change the clock. Right? I can't slow down the clock. And I know an hour is not much time, whether it's the minister or anyone else to come before a committee. But if we invite someone to a committee and they say, I can only be there for an hour, well, then that's up to the committee to say yes, or we'll wait for another time.
We've invited her for 2 hours, and she's only showed up for 1. So
yes.
You know, legitimately, we've asked properly, and she's
but I
even
can go back to a previous
and,
time when a minister didn't show up at all. So, you know, it's give and take. I can't control the clock.
I appreciate your efforts, Chair. I just, I guess when I saw my colleague lose his shot to ask the minister a question, it was unfortunate. And it just would be nice that we could, you know, see that disparity realized.
Yeah, but to that point, Mr. Hardy had to give up 2 minutes in his 5-minute slot, even before we got a chance to go to Mr. Small. You know, I want everybody to participate in the committee as it's going, but again, everybody got to, and you can turn on your own timers if you like, but I'll still keep track of the time. But it's easy when you're doing it, sitting there asking a question and getting an answer. 5 minutes is nothing. I mean, it goes by in a blink. But unfortunately, when we have so many members and so many people looking to ask questions, on an hour, it's hard to get the full rounds in, right? And I know what you're saying, but I can't control it, and especially when you look at the time that do go over, very seldom do we go under. Madame Debienne was under 10 seconds because simply you haven't got time to ask a question in 10 seconds, so I didn't let it go on. But, you know, and I'll be cognizant of it in the future to try and keep people to their time. But again, we got to have respect for witnesses as well as we allow them to answer a question. So, all right. Meeting adjourned.